Welcome to the Bruce Lee podcast. This week's episode has another member of our warrior family joining me. Hoon Lee plays the wily Chinatown fixer Wang Chao in Warrior, another of my favorite characters. Hoon is an award winning actor with a rapier like wit, a keen intellect, and a very kind heart. Please read Hoon's bio in our show notes to see the multifaceted cast of characters he has portrayed on both stage and screen. Everything from the King of Siam in The King and I to most recently Toad on the second season of C. Hoon is an intelligent, funny, and thoughtful man whose generosity as an actor and a human being is greatly appreciated by all who know him. I love listening to him and the other cast members verbally spar and roast one another whenever they are together. It's really something to behold. But seriously, his care for his fellow actors and the characters of Warrior won him a place in the writer's room for season 3. I am so excited for what we are cooking up for season 3, and I know you are too. But for now, please tune in and listen to Hoon and I talk warrior, acting, and the meaning of family on this edition of the Bruce Lee Podcast. Hey everyone, welcome to the Bruce Lee Podcast. My episode today is none other than Hoon Lee. Hey Hoon, how are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Good, thanks. Excited to see your face, and
Yeah, likewise. It's been a long time.
it's been a long time, yeah.
Yeah.
And we were just talking before we started about how excited we are for Warrior to get going
Oh
again.
my God. Yeah. And it's nice to see other people are excited too. It'd be kind of a bummer if we were the only people excited. It'd be just
That
like,
would be them.
yeah, people are just like, you're starting again. Cool. Cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, good for you.
Yeah. I think it's a universal feeling amongst the cast and team. We're so thrilled to have another shot at it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I understand the writer's room is getting started pretty soon.
That's right. Yeah. It's going to
Yeah.
be starting relatively soon. Yeah.
And is there something exciting about the writer's room you want to tell me?
Well, this season I am going to be joining the writer's room in addition to being an actor on the show. Yeah,
Amazing.
it's only taken me 10 years of working with Jonathan Dropper
You
to work
finally
my
gained
way
his
up to
trust.
staff writer. No, it's an amazing opportunity actually, and it was something that sort of grew organically. Jonathan and I have worked together for a long time now, literally like
Yeah,
10 years.
yeah.
And our relationship is great. He's obviously been very sort of generous in hiring me. Basically, he pretty much accounts for 70-80% of my career, so I owe him. But when the opportunity came up in conversation, I realized that this was a show that I just love, and along with the rest of the cast and the team and yourself, I think people have just sweated blood for this and are invested emotionally in a way that is unusual. And so I realized that I very much wanted to participate in the creation of the scripts, mostly because I'm a tremendous fan of my castmates, and the idea of putting them into some situations that would really let them show what they can do as the marvelous actors that they are was just like a thrilling proposition for me. And so I figured I would leverage all the dirt I have on Jonathan and see if I
Blackmail.
could get.
It's such a great tactic.
I mean, it's the American way. That's one thing the show is teaching us.
Exactly. You're
Yeah,
learning. You're learning
yeah,
from,
yeah, yeah.
So is writing something you've always done or wanted to do, or what's your relationship with writing?
It's funny. I think that when I look back on it, I've done a lot of writing in my life, but just in the ways that were sort of asked of me. Like there was so much writing in my education, and I think this is not atypical, but in the sort of academic path that I was on, you write a lot, and
Mhm.
And I always was interested in storytelling and writing on that level because I was always interested in comic books. I was always interested in sort of visual storytelling, and then as
Mhm.
an actor, obviously you become very invested in understanding scripts, understanding the process there.
Right.
And so I wouldn't say that I had. By the way, am I getting a weird echo? Are you getting a weird echo?
I'm not getting a
Okay,
weird
okay.
echo.
I just
I
want to
don't
make
think.
sure. Um, all of this technology is like
I
I'm
know.
so thrilled to be playing with it, but it's also baffling. I think that I've just grown more and more attuned to how important the writing is in any of these endeavors, and it's become something that I feel more and more sort of in command of. And so I
Mhm.
think that this is sort of the next step in trying to grow really as an
Yeah.
artist, and it's there's really no guarantee that it'll work out, but this is a show where at least I know I'm so invested that I will give it, my maximum effort and, everything I can bring to bear, and that
Yeah.
I have a tremendous amount of affection for it. I have a tremendous amount of affection for the people. So even
Yeah.
if this ends up being a one and done, I think it'll be an incredible experience.
Well, that's for sure. And I can I, I have to say, like, there's no part of me that thinks that this is not going to be successful. I mean, first of all, you have the support of Jonathan, and you have,
Yeah.
the support of everyone. And you are such a intelligent, well-spoken, whip smart, wonderful human being. Like, I know we haven't spent a ton of time together, but I just need you to know, like, that is
Oh,
my reflection of you. Like,
thank you.
I'm just like, I mean, even part of me was like, okay, we're gonna do this podcast. I'm like, gosh, I hope I can keep up with Hoon Lee. Like, I feel like Hoon is
It's not
like.
hard. Trust me. it's, it's not it's not that big a
I don't
feat.
know. I don't know. You're so funny. You have such a wonderful, like, dry sense of humor that I just adore. And
Thank you.
I love the way you and the cast just like rib each other so hard back and forth all the time. But it's just a beautiful thing to watch. So,
We I know we're speaking on the topic of family, and
yeah.
there's so many instances in the memory of making the show where that word surfaces in a very organic way and
Mm,
in a very loving way. Family is such a fraught topic, and it's so
totally.
complex, so nuanced,
Yeah.
and it's nice when you have an environment that seems to really embody the best parts of it.
Yeah.
And especially in a found family or in an assembled family as opposed to the one you're born into. I mean, that's just luck of the draw, right? You're kind of
Yeah.
like, I hope I'm not surrounded by awful people.
Yeah.
But in a profession where you have
Yeah.
agency and you can choose to leave, you can choose to ignore
Yeah.
people. Um,
No,
Feeling like you want to participate in that family is such a gift.
yeah, I love the way you put that, found family, because certainly, I mean, so there's your nuclear blood family, there's your chosen family, like people you
Mm,
choose, and then but in an instance like this where you're on a show, it's like you don't get to choose
no,
who these people are. You're
right.
just all thrown together, and the fact that we have found such a familial connection amongst all of us is a really, I would imagine, rare. I mean, you tell me, rare and beautiful thing.
I've been very lucky in my jobs in that I think I've been parts of very tight knit casts. Generally, more in theater because I think there are certain aspects of theater that lend themselves better to that relationship. Um,
Mhm.
but this is quite unique, I think, because not only is it amongst the cast, but it's also amongst the creative team. And it's also amongst the crew in a very special way because being in Cape Town, we're dealing with a group of people we really have to try to get to know
Mhm.
because there's a cultural divide, you know.
Mhm. Mhm.
One
Mhm.
second.
Bless you.
Thank you. And so I think that there was and because we were all not from Cape Town, I mean, the cast and the crew,
Yeah.
going there all at once and sort of being put in this bubble together before even the COVID bubble, being put in
Right.
this sort of geographic bubble, um, that can often stimulate a lot of closeness, but it can also amplify any sort of discord.
Right.
So
Right.
I think that we got very lucky that the discord was at a bare minimum, and I would say mostly very much in line with the sort of thing is that's almost necessary to do creative work. There's
Yeah.
a certain amount of friction is required, I think, to get everyone to go to their A game.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we had a very, very bare minimum of that. Certainly nothing that I experienced that I would feel was personal.
Right.
And there was just a huge avalanche of goodwill and good feeling, and almost sickening. Let's be honest. Like, it's getting to that.
True.
Like the love fest is intense, and like we're on the inside of it. I imagine there's quite a lot of eye rolling out in the
I know, right?
Twitter sphere or whatever.
They're
But
like, oh, here they are again, the
yeah,
warrior
and it's
people
like,
talking
oh, we
about how
get
much
it. You
they
like
love
each
each
other, fine.
Exactly.
But it's 100% real, and
Yeah.
so you never expect it, but you hope for it, and it's very unique in that way. And like I said, I'm coming from places where I felt very close to the Banshee cast. I still have lifelong friends from that. When I did The King and I on Broadway, that cast was amazing, and I came into that cast, after they had begun, but they very much took me in as well, and even with the challenges of season 2 of C with COVID restrictions,
Yeah.
which makes it very much harder to get close to people
Right.
in all dimensions. They were so generous with their, the warmth of the cast and welcoming me into an ongoing situation. But even amongst those very fortunate environments, this is a unique one.
Yeah. 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 Oh, that's so wonderful.
Yeah, it's great.
So just
And
for
now we
people
can
who,
ruin it. Now we
yeah,
have a
now I can
chance to
ruin it. Yeah.
destroy it all.
We'll come out like after season 3 and be like, we all hate each other
Everyone
now.
is different. Everyone's like, I've got a lot of ideas. I know how this show should go.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I know. Well, now you in the writers room, like you're going to be pulling all the strings.
Oh,
You're
yeah. Now it's just like 8 episodes about Chow's backstory and his love interest. He has like 23 daughters we don't know about. No,
yeah, exactly.
actually, when I was in conversation with Jonathan, it was very important to me to, I value the relationships that I make in the work way more than anything else, because, at the end of the day, there's so many people involved with the creation of a show. Your ability to influence whether it is something that you think is good is quite limited as an actor.
Yeah.
And so you have to trust a lot of people to, you have to trust the writers, you have to trust the directors, the editors, everyone, your producers, everyone. And so at the end of the day, when I come out of these work environments, it's really about the day to day. It's really about the relationships. And, was I challenged, and was I able to get along with people? Did we have a wonderful time? Did we, did I come out with friends? That's the thing I have control over, and the thing I can sort of manage and assess more clearly. And, I value that so much. When I was talking to Jonathan about the writer's room, I told him, like I said, listen, if it ever becomes any sort of weird issue, just kill me. Like, just like kill the character. Like I'm not here to cause problems, and I, I've worked out a couple ways Chow could go, just to have him in my back pocket, just in case,
just
you
in case
start
you got to
reading
whip
the
that
room.
out.
Yeah, so it's like, hey, I'm very unpopular. I should go.
It's time. The time has come.
Because I just, the last thing I would want is to feel weird about that situation myself, or to damage relationships that I've made. And I don't think that will happen. I remain optimistic. Nothing weird is going to happen. That's as much down to everyone else. Everyone else has been incredibly supportive of the whole situation. But it's something that I think about. Sure.
No, totally. It's like friends starting to date, and then you're like, but we don't want to ruin the friendship.
Yeah.
Yeah. I really doubt that will become a problem, and I would be
Oh, yeah.
really sad if Chow. I just love Chow as a character on the
Well, I
show,
don't know.
and you.
I've been on a bunch of Jonathan shows now. He likes to beat me up. So, like there's always there's a torture scene, there's like a death. I can't. I was like, is he trying to tell me something? Because I think he
Yeah,
likes to see me upset on camera. I think he thinks that's my sweet spot. I'm just
yeah.
in distress. So,
So how did you so you said you were on an academic path. For people who don't
yeah.
know, like, what was that path, and then how did that turn to acting?
I think that like a lot of children of immigrants, there was very much a push to become a doctor, like specifically a doctor.
Yeah.
Um, and a lot. My parents were scientists. My brother's a scientist, and so there was a lot of a push. There was a lot of push into science and technology. That was what they knew. That's it makes a lot of sense.
Mhm.
I was always interested in drawing and the arts. And so I did sort of fight my corner in school for that, just to make sure I would take classes in visual art in particular.
Right.
Um, I ended up following my brother to Harvard, and there I actually majored in visual art, which at Harvard is called Visual and Environmental Studies.
Let's just take that word art right out of there.
Yeah, when I went to school, I you get to, at least at the time, you filled out your own diploma, right? You said this is what I studied on your diploma.
Uh-huh.
And I guess the sense is that the pressure of having this diploma that you're going to carry around forever, you're not going to screw with that too much. But I was like, this seems rife for abuse.
Totally.
Um, like anyway, so I decided to use the full names of my major and minor because they were ridiculously long at the time, and it was Visual and Environmental Studies and English and American Language and Literature. So that's what I wrote. But if you translate that, it's drawing and reading. That's
Yes.
pretty much drawing and reading. I majored in drawing and reading. Um,
Excellent.
yeah.
Yeah.
But during that time, I I never thought I would be a performer. Actually,
Mm.
it never crossed my mind.
Hmm.
And I actually went into design. I actually went into graphic design with a partner of mine, friend of mine at school, and we had a great like creative and professional partnership for a long time. And we ended up joining a startup company that was taking off at the time, which was pivoting from sort of a bleeding edge, and I mean bleeding edge, sort of in browser virtual reality play into web consultancy. And as part of that team, I was kind of involved with my first startup, and this was sort of at the tail end of the first bubble. Like we missed a lot of the bubble, and we caught a
Yeah.
lot of the bust
Yeah.
um,
Oh,
in that first swing. And I actually ended up doing another startup with a lot of the same people afterwards.
wow.
But that life was burning me up pretty badly, and it was very hard, and I was not well. I physically was falling apart. A lot of us were. We were just working constantly and really stressed out.
Yeah.
And I had this opportunity to perform in a musical called Making Tracks that a friend of mine was scoring. This
Mm.
composer who now lives in Korea, Woody Pak, and that experience really sparked everything. Um,
Mm.
because not because I thought I was going to become an actor, but because it it was suddenly an area where I was growing a lot again, and
Mm.
felt sort of enriched, and I felt like I was having fun. I felt like I was enjoying myself again. But after that experience, honestly, I didn't think I was going to act either, and I just started gathering my materials together to freelance as a designer and an interface designer.
Uh-huh.
But the choreographer from that show, a gentleman named Mark Oka, who you know was sort of like an early contact of mine, someone who gave me a lot of advice and nurturing. He introduced me to, he got me an audition basically for this production of The King and I that was going up in Paper Mill Playhouse at the time.
Uh-huh.
Um, and so I ended up understudying the late Kevin Gray, who was also, along with Carolee Carmello, who they were just like Broadway vets, just total pros. And I learned a ton just watching them.
Mm.
Um, and right on the heels of that, I got this audition for the Rodgers and Hammerstein revival of Flower Drum Song that was coming to Broadway that David Henry Hwang
Oh, yeah.
was
I
doing
know
the book for.
David.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
And so
Yeah.
that was like my first year, and so it just all kind of strung together. And that was again just like incredibly fortuitous events linked together. At the
Yeah.
time, it was quite rare to have more than one Asian show
Yeah.
happening, you know,
Right.
let
Sure.
alone Asian shows where there was a type that I could kind of fit. Um,
Yeah.
so, I just started doing it. And it took me a number of years before I sort of admitted to myself that that's what I was doing. Um,
Yeah.
because I would get some work and I started doing these readings at the Lark Play Development Center in New York, which was just an incredible education as well.
Hmm.
And, but it took me a long time to kind of say, oh, I guess I'm an actor. Um,
Yeah. I think
yeah.
I mean, it takes a long time, I think, as an actor to feel like, oh, I'm really having a career as an actor,
Yeah.
I think, you know. I mean, for
Especially
some,
because you're always cognizant that it feels ephemeral, right?
yes, exactly.
Right. It's like, well, it's here now, but
Yeah, right. I have a job right
maybe I
now.
shouldn't get those business cards printed because who knows?
Yeah, well, I always loved, so my dad had a bunch of business cards that he would get printed in Hong Kong, and I just always loved them because all they say on them is Bruce Lee.
Yeah,
I'm
that's the way to do it.
that's the way to do it. Like no phone number, nothing, just like this is all you need to know, and this will always be true.
Yeah. Yep. There you go. There you go. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So did your were your parents supportive of you going into the arts?
Um,
Because I
in their
just
way, I think
in their way.
so.
Yeah.
The way I think about it is they clearly had preferences. They
Hmm.
clearly, um, they had positions on it.
Hmm.
And I remember my dad in particular articulating to me once that from his generation, his perspective, and this I don't think was an attitude that he necessarily held deeply because he was actually quite artistic himself. He was an amazing singer for one thing. It took me a long time. When you're young, everything your parents do is kind of amazing. And then as you get older and your perspective broadens and you start to be able to assess them more objectively,
Hmm.
there's a fall off, right? You kind
Yeah.
of understand how they're mortal. But even within that context, it was clear to me my dad was like a very high caliber singer, like easily could have been professional and could have been a very high level professional singer,
Wow.
which was therefore made it a little bit sad for me that he never really pursued that.
Right.
He taught himself Italian opera just from listening to vinyl over and over and over again, and
Wow.
that sort of thing. But he once articulated to me this sort of idea that even if you were sort of at the top of the artistic ladder, that was still sort of the bottom of all these other ladders. In sort of that's how he was raised. He wasn't
Yes.
trying to tell me that's no good. He was trying to
Yeah.
explain to me why he had certain predispositions.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
but having said all that, the only way that I felt really discouraged was that it was sort of like a prove it mentality. If you
Yeah.
want to do this, prove it. Prove you want to do it.
Yeah.
And I thought that was fair.
Yeah.
And I still think that's fair.
Uh-huh.
Um, it's one thing to say I have all these dreams. It's another thing to really try to figure out how to do it. Really try to figure out what it will cost you.
Yeah.
And I don't think that they weren't like um, it wasn't like they were like, okay, you want to do this, and then they just started like parading out tutors and everything like that. But I also
Hmm.
think that was partially because they weren't necessarily equipped to do that. They didn't
Sure.
know what the correct path was to pursue that.
Sure. Makes sense.
Yeah, so I thought it was quite fair actually, and I don't think that I didn't feel held back by it. I felt like that there was an open door. They just weren't going to like
Yeah.
put me put me on an escalator to it. They were just kind of like,
Yeah.
there it is.
There
Um,
you go. Right there.
Yeah, yeah. So I thought that was a totally legitimate stance.
Yeah. Yeah. I hear you saying, I've heard you say a couple times now, I felt like in that moment, I felt like I was growing again.
Mm,
It sounds to me like that sense of growth, that sense of discovery is something. that you really value and that really makes you sort of feel alive and is something that you follow. Would you say that that's
I,
true?
I'd argue it's almost the most important thing.
Mhm.
Um, I, I'd say if you had to, if someone said, "Here's a job, here's an assortment of jobs. One of them is going to pay you really well. One of them is going to let you have a lot of fun, whatever it might be."
Mhm.
I would pick the one that says there's growth opportunity here. There's a way to deepen yourself as a person.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah.
because I think everything else sort of flows from that. Your ability to become better at every aspect of your life starts with an openness to learn
Yeah.
and an open and a willingness and a desire, not just a I'll go with that, but sort of a hunger for it, I think. And I think
Yeah.
most of us do have it, and there are a lot of mechanisms introduced to our lives through the world that sort of quash it or discourage you from it.
Mhm.
Um, but I do feel like it's such a basic human instinct to pursue these things. Um,
Yeah, but and I think there has to be a certain amount of acceptance around that path is naturally going to be fraught with a little bit of challenge
yeah,
and tension and
yeah,
friction, as you mentioned, like in relation to, just onset, helping your art move forward, right?
hmm
And that it's such a wonderful thing to welcome that in. Like that is part of, as you said, what makes you better at every aspect of your life.
and I think it goes. It that's part of the reason why I think it goes hand in hand with humility. Right,
Mm.
humility is something I've been thinking about a lot over the past couple of years.
Mhm.
And it goes hand in hand because, if you're learning, you're going to look dumb. Like there's long stretches of time where
Yeah.
you look dumb. And, uh, and I think that it requires almost in a counterintuitive way,
Mhm.
it requires a huge amount of uh, self-assurance
Yeah.
and a huge amount of humility
Yeah.
to just understand that that's part of your process. You're never getting around it. And
Mhm.
just the sooner you kind of march through it, the quicker you can get to the good stuff. And
Yeah.
and if you are constantly pursuing that growth, you never really leave that zone. You never really escape it. Um, I think that oh, I think that when there's a danger is when you get real comfortable,
Mhm.
and because in that comfort you can start to get satisfaction in this sort of self-aggrandizement or whatever it might be. That becomes the thing, right? And it's tough though. It's tough, especially in an industry where they want to. You're kind of incentivized to be like, even in social media, for example, right? It's weirdly intuitively competitive, right? Well, my vacation looks like this. You're
Right.
no, very few people are posting like, "Hey, I stubbed my toe," and
Right.
like I'm wearing sweatpants for the 14th day in a row. They smell bad. They smell really bad. Like very few people are doing that.
Right.
Everyone is sort of putting their best, and so it becomes this sort of one-upsmanship, that we're all aware of, and
Yeah.
to not participate is an act in and of itself. It's a choice to not participate, but you feel like it's either fear of missing out or it is, am I not marketing myself smartly, whatever it
Right.
might be.
Right.
Um, but I think at the end of the day, I just need to keep feeling like I'm learning things.
Mhm.
Otherwise, I don't really see the point. I don't really know.
Yeah, well, anytime that I've, like, sort of gone into a little bit of a hole, which I am apt to do from time to time of complacency or sloth.
Hmm.
I mean, that comfort, if you will, is only comfortable for so long. And then it's like, okay, and now I'm just like turning into a human puddle, like
Right.
and and um this isn't really like being actively engaged with life, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Yeah. And
And it.
there's go ahead.
Oh no, please, please.
I was gonna say there's a certain amount of tension that exists if you're actively engaged.
Absolutely. And it's across so many things. I think we focus very intensely on profession.
Hmm.
Sometimes we'll focus very intensely on some part of personal development, say,
Hmm.
physical fitness but it's really everything, when I think about, relationships that you have, with your partner, spouse, friends, whatever it is. It's like there's an effort that's required to try to grow together
Yes.
so
Hmm.
that you can remain together, right?
Hmm.
Because the danger often is, it seems to me, is people come together, let's say in some sort of romantic union or what have you, a marriage, and then they develop separately. They
Yeah.
start to grow separately, and suddenly the things that tied them together are weaker,
Yeah.
and they're in different places now, and they want different things, or
Hmm.
one person hasn't lost that hunger to develop, the other person has gotten quite comfortable, whatever that might be. So
Right.
there's a concerted effort required to sort of keep moving together so that you can keep growing together,
Yeah.
right? And that
Yeah.
applies to, you know, that applies to caste dynamics, that applies to any relationship that you value. I
Sure.
think really, I think people don't sometimes get distracted by other aspects of what's going on. And they're like, well, I feel pretty secure in that. I can deprioritize that for a little bit.
Uh-huh.
But even amongst a cast, you know, checking in with people, one thing that we did very regularly on Warrior, people would just go and watch other people's scenes they weren't even in.
Yeah.
They'd go to set, and you felt like you had this sort of support behind you. But
Hmm.
also pragmatically, it meant that people were literally seeing other parts of the show
Yeah.
so that we could understand the show together. We
Mm.
understood how things were unfolding together. And
Yeah.
I think that that helps. It helps to have not so much you can do. Your life is somewhere else. So you're like, I might as well go to set. And I mean, there's only so much king clip I can eat, but but
Yeah.
I think that does make a difference. It makes a difference to feel like you're plugged into the world. Our sessions with Brett, where we would train in the mornings, and a lot of the
Yeah.
cast would show up and do that.
Yeah.
Um, it helped us grow with the stunt team together. It helped us,
Yeah.
and we were there on set. So it's a trivial thing to stop by and say hi to the writers and producers. It's trivial to swing by set if we're shooting on the back lot. And so all of these small ways that you continue to grow as a unit,
Mm.
pays dividends later when things get stressful. You know.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so it seems like, so the theme is family, and
Hmm.
it sounds like a lot of what you're talking about is, around that notion of like connection with family. So I'm wondering, like, to you, what is, in the best sense of the word, what is the feeling of family for you?
This is going to sound not positive. This is going to sound
That's all
not
right.
positive. Um,
Or negative, as
I,
we
I
like to
had
call
I
it.
had given this a little bit of thought because I was like, oh, we're going to talk about family. What's interesting to me about family, and I won't say this is the pure definition of it, so I'm not
Right.
sure. I might dodge that question a little bit directly,
That's all right.
but you can just edit something in, just like a voiceover. It's like,
Okay.
I believe that family is. I think there's a sense of family being a constraint you can't escape,
Mm,
right? So I'm talking about blood family in this particular case.
okay.
Um, and in other versions of family, meaning the family you choose or the found family, you have a lot more agency there,
Mhm.
but you choose the constraint, but there's
Mm,
still a constraint.
yes.
Um, and that might be because there's a counterbalance. So, for example, professionally, you don't want to lose the job, you need the job.
Mhm.
It's most vital and most sort of visceral with your blood family because you have ties that you can see genetically. You have ties that go from birth. The acculturation, the growth in your family, whatever it might be. It's
Yeah.
incredibly tight, and that's the constraint. The constraint is that's what you're given.
Mhm.
Work with that. Work
Mhm.
with that. If you have a difficult relationship with your father or mother, You got to
Yeah.
work with it.
Gotta
You
work
got to
with it.
figure out what it means to work with it.
Yeah.
And so in a weird way, um, the dynamics of your family, the constraints that you're born into, they're the best opportunity for you to sort of strengthen and shape yourself
Hmm.
because everyone understands that constraint.
Yes.
It's not something you easily walk away from.
Hmm.
It's not something you can easily escape, even if you choose to walk away from it, right?
Right.
The legacies of your ancestors are going to follow with you, right? And you would know
Yeah.
that probably better than almost anyone, right?
Yep.
Right.
Hmm.
Maybe
Yeah.
Michael Jordan's kids, right?
Yes.
You guys get together, just be like, oh my God,
I know. Like, what the heck? No.
if I hear the word icon one more time.
Exactly.
Um, but that constraint, I think, is, I think most creative people understand the value of constraint. They
Yeah.
understand what a propulsive force it is and how
Yep.
necessary it is,
Yep.
and that you cannot really have creativity without it, I think, right?
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
in that way, it's a very positive thing. It's
Totally.
the family is the set of constraints that you are either born into or that you choose as a human. If you look at your life as sort of a creative endeavor, it's somewhat akin to the creative constraints you might place on yourself as an actor, as a writer, as a dancer, as whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Um, and so I feel like that's because it's so high stakes, because it's so difficult to um, divorce yourself from. It has a huge amount of weight in your life. It has a huge amount of potential to guide you and shape you and make you better or make you worse. And so it's like
Yeah.
it's that whole engineered machine that ends up creating you. Um,
Well, and by your choosing, right? Like by
yeah.
your choosing whether it makes you better or worse, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
I love this answer, by the way. Thank you. And it makes me think of my dad would talk about the parable of the butcher
Mm,
who there was this butcher that was a butcher for many, many years, and um, his knife always remained sharp. And
mm,
when they came to him and they said, "Why is your knife always sharp and it never gets dull?" And he said, "Because I work along the plane of the bone. I don't
mm,
try to assail the bone with
mm-hmm.
my knife because that would only dull my knife. I have to work with the bone." And it just this answer just sort of makes me think of that. It's like, yes, we all have these constraints, these boundaries
Yeah.
that we're sort of like trying to work with in the best possible way in order to remain, sharp as it were, but really um balanced and feeling good and engaged and connected and all those
And
things.
I think also helpful, like, especially once you get past the point in your life where you like survival is what you're dealing with, right? Whether
Yeah,
that's and
right.
that can be like emotional, like in the thick of adolescence,
Right.
it feels like emotional survival, right? You're like, I don't know what's going to happen, if she
Right.
doesn't go out with me,
Right.
right? And we
Yeah.
forget that like the stakes are real at that point, partially because your hormones are doing like
Yeah.
gymnastics all over the place, but also because, the extent of experience you have in life, that's really high stakes for as far as you've gone, right?
Yeah.
And then
Right.
as you get older and older and the world expands for you,
Mhm.
things get the volume turned up or turned down, depending. But I do feel
Right.
that the more, the older I get and the more you kind of get past that point of feeling like you're fighting for survival all the time, eventually the thoughts become attuned towards, they face outwards. They start to become more about like, well, what can I do for someone else? Or
Mhm.
how do I make this circle better? How do I make this circle bigger and stronger and better so all that also I can benefit from that, because you start to understand, yeah, I mean, it's great if you're sitting around on a pile of money, that's great, but if there's nothing around you that you can use that money on, what's the point?
Right.
Right? So at
Yeah.
some level you're strengthening the world around you in order to participate and enjoy it, even if your
Yeah.
means are somewhat selfish or your intention is somewhat selfish.
Right.
And so I find that happens a lot. And that's led me more and more towards, even as my own personal family shrinks, like my found family and my chosen family is growing larger.
Yeah.
And I love that. I mean, to me, that's the best. And one of the things about acting I never really thought about when I first got into it was that you're basically a temp, right? So you're constantly
Yeah.
finding new people,
Yeah.
and you're able to somewhat present your best self a lot of the times because it's often a short-lived interaction. And
Yeah.
when things are a little dicey, you're kind of thankful for that. You're like, well, I
This will
can
be
get
over
out of
soon.
this. Yeah.
Yeah.
But when things are great, it's bittersweet because you're like, this will come to an end, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but then you can also be like, well, it will come to an end before they realize what an asshole I am. They'll see this version of me.
Right. Yeah.
Aces.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And then I
Um,
get out of here.
yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. No, that's beautiful and lovely. I mean, I all of your answers remind me so much of my father, whom we
mm,
haven't even talked about yet,
mm,
but who was so dedicated to learning and discovery. And I just, as time went on, and of course he only lived to the age of 32, he was just saying like every day there's something new that I can learn and something new that I can discover. And he was just so like lit up by that. Like he just loved that. He was like, there is literally no end. It's
yeah.
limitless. Like,
And I think there's a thread of despair there because, and I think that's something people face a lot. Um,
mm-hmm.
the sort of pragmatic example of this is just some comedian said this once. I'm totally going to massacre this, but they were kind of like, who knew that the entirety of human knowledge would make everyone so dumb? Like access.
Yeah, right.
There's something to that, right? When
Yeah,
when the floodgates are open, you just shut your eyes and try to withstand it. And I think
yeah,
that that's something that we face a lot. We
yeah.
have technologically evolved ourselves past our biology
Mm,
so quickly,
mm.
and we aren't even aware of it. We aren't even aware of how poorly adapted we are for the things that we've invented. Right? We're
Yeah,
not going to know for some time.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and I think about that a lot because I'm so invested in these technologies,
Mm,
and I don't know how they're affecting me. And
yeah,
there's not a lot of people who do know, not with great authority, at
yeah,
least. And you
yeah,
have to intuit everything. But
yeah.
if there's one thing that history teaches us, human intuition is pretty dicey. You know, yeah, there's a reason we developed science. We're kind of like, we need a better system than
Yeah.
like Gary's best guess. You know, like we
Yeah.
need some rules.
Little structure around this
Yeah, a
thing.
little structure would be good. Let's write some stuff down.
You're right.
You know, um,
Pass that on to the next
yeah,
generation, let them know,
and let
"Don't
someone
eat
check
this
my
plant."
work.
Yeah.
I'm not the best without a calculator. Like someone should check this. Uh, and like similarly in every artistic endeavor, we have this romance of of an artist as being a solitary figure,
Yeah,
and I mean, especially in acting, nothing could be further from the truth.
yeah,
And so there's again this sort of willingness to participate, a willingness to be collaborative. I think is a prerequisite. Even people that
yeah.
you who probably have a reputation for being difficult, who have a reputation for being very, very strong-willed.
Mhm.
I've certainly not found in my experience that there's a lot of room for like an autocratic mentality, um, except in maybe a couple of positions, basically tied strongly to money. um, but I think, Shannon, did I lose you?
Here.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Okay. Yeah, no, I know. The internet seems to be a little,
It's because we were
uh
talking smack about the internet. See,
that's right.
it's like the internet's like, who's dumb now?
The internet gods were
The
like, "I
internet's not
smite you."
happy. Um, but
But
like
I can hear you, but so
okay, so
yeah.
these individuals that maybe have reputations, I think a lot of the times it's just they want to collaborate, but they maybe have different standards about who's sort of worthy to collaborate
Mm,
or who's sort of at their level. But
mhm.
I think it's a very difficult thing to work in this industry without having that willingness and that mentality. Or more kindly, they've been burned in a way that their trust is damaged, their ability to
Yes.
trust is damaged, and
Sure.
maybe they're right to have that position. I don't
Yeah.
know what their lives are like. I don't know what they've experienced.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so I think that that's an incredibly kind thing to compare me to your father, though, because I think that as somebody who is one of the few representatives of sort of, I don't even know what you describe it at this point, but one of the few representatives, sort of like the Asian presence in popular culture and in culture in general.
Hmm.
One thing that's fascinating about him to me is the complexity of what he presented.
Yeah.
When you wrote that article, kind of commenting on Quentin Tarantino,
Hmm.
what I thought was interesting about that, aside from the actual article, was that that conversation was happening was so indicative of the breadth of reach
Mm.
that he had, and also the breadth of impressions that he would give. And that really only happens when somebody has affected millions and millions of people. Like that range,
Yeah.
that dynamic range. I mean, if people watch my my career, they're like, he does two things, right? They could come away thinking maybe three. If I'm really pushing. If I've got a beard. Um, but there's this
No, no.
sort of sense of the impact that your father had
Yeah.
and continues to have. It's
Yeah.
going to engender that
Yeah.
just by its scope.
Yeah.
Just by its scope. It's
Yeah.
sort of like if you have 9 million Twitter followers, every day, like 10,000 people are talking smack about you. It's
Yeah.
just statistics,
Yeah. Right.
right?
Yeah.
And so there's something interesting about that. There's something interesting about, and that, when I think about him, I think about the philosophical side. I think about the scholarly side. I think about his stance as a student. I think about the things he tried to contribute and did contribute to scholarship,
Hmm.
philosophy,
Hmm.
physical training, just how ahead of his time he was in
Hmm.
those areas, which are linked to sort of our understanding of physiology.
Yeah.
And then you watch him on screen, and the characters he was making, they could be incredibly cocksure, they could be, arrogant, they could be incredibly violent, vicious,
Hmm. And
beautiful,
humorous, even.
humorous, super funny, super
Yeah.
witty, not just
Hmm.
funny, witty. Um,
Hmm. Hmm.
and, that scope
Mm.
is why he can, like, everyone can kind of pour themselves into him. He's big enough.
Yeah.
They can pour themselves into him, and they can
Mm.
feel, he's feeling what I'm feeling.
Yeah.
That's how I want to feel.
Yeah.
That's how I used to feel.
Mm.
All of these things.
Yeah.
So that's what comes with it. That's what comes with that scale, that scope.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Oof,
I yeah,
I love that.
I like when I follow the NBA a bit, and like whenever I'm just so tickled by sports fans who are just like, they'll bag on somebody like LeBron or whatever,
Yeah.
and I'm just like, literally,
Right.
like, you can't do like a fifth of a percent of what this man can do.
Right.
Like, he's right to ignore you.
Right.
You have no valuable information,
Right.
you know?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so that's always amusing. But that, again, that's part of spectating, that's part of human
Yeah.
recreation and enjoyment and investment. And I think that the people who understand that and appreciate their position understand that that's part of it.
Yeah.
That's part of what you take on in order
Yeah.
to reach everybody, as many people as you can, and hopefully do something good with that.
Yeah.
You take that other side on as well.
Yeah. It
Which is
is.
why I
It's a
choose to
lot.
have a small career.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Me too, by the way.
I just I don't think the world's ready.
They're
Just
not ready to
gotta
take
keep it
you on, to pour
contained.
themselves into you.
Oh
uh,
man.
so I have so many questions, and we've been talking for a little while, but um, I will ask. So, I mean, how were you introduced to Bruce Lee? How did you find him?
I found him I think there's a lot of people in I grew up in a predominantly white suburb when I was young. And so there was like a Saturday, kung fu
Yeah.
doubleheader,
Yeah.
and you'd encounter that. But I have to say, like, the moment I remember really clearly was, I remember him visually. And I think this is just because I was so interested in drawing. And I was so interested in superheroes.
Mm.
Him in the yellow tracksuit
Yeah.
was so iconic to me. And it's really the predominant image I had growing up. It was some flash. And I don't even know when I saw that movie. Like, I don't have that moment where I was like, sat down, saw this movie. But I remember being just so sort of caught up in that. And he looked like a superhero to me. He looked
Mm.
like, he looked like a superhero. He was in a uniform. He was in a
Yeah.
bright colored uniform. He was taking down a giant. It was like this, it
Right.
was this amazing thing.
Yeah.
Um, but I don't think I really got interested until I learned that he had developed his own system.
Yeah.
That's when it started to become like, I was like, oh, you can do that? Like, I don't think I knew. It's like, as far as I knew, like, everything was carved on stone tablets in some cave, and there's like
Right.
3 old men come down and they get a bunch of students. But like, the idea that someone could learn,
Mm.
process, and then iterate
Mhm.
on something that I thought was sort of immutable
Right.
was
Right.
fascinating.
Yeah.
That was like a really fascinating concept.
Yeah.
And, so I think that mostly, I don't think there was ever like a lightning bolt moment,
Sure.
but from that point forward, those were the sort of impressions that I got that changed my understanding,
Mhm.
and um, also made me realize this was different. This was somewhat different.
Yeah.
Um, because then you were kind of like, I've just never heard of that before. I've never heard of, like, you don't, however you feel about them as individuals or martial artists, whatever, you just don't hear about it. You don't hear about
Yeah.
people doing it.
Right.
We take it as a given now that a successful MMA athlete, or et cetera, has to be multidisciplinary, for example.
Yeah. Mhm.
But that was a radically different idea from what I knew growing up.
Yeah.
And
Totally.
those sorts of intellectual pursuits is where I felt like I started to hook in, because I was being pushed along on such an academic path. And
Mhm.
you kind of go, that physical world is never going to happen, right? Like, I'm never going to have six-pack abs. And now I know I really never will. It was a viable dream when you're like 14. You're like, I
Yeah.
could grow into that.
Yeah.
But the intellectual side of it was the part where you were kind of like, I understand that. Like, I understand this
Yeah.
side of this person.
Yeah.
And to see those two things married suddenly made them, it made the unification of those ideas and the sort of the extremity of those manifestations really possible.
Yeah.
And I think if you grow up in an academic environment, you often feel they're not. You feel like there's the physical world, there's the intellectual, mental world, and you're very much supposed to prioritize the intellectual, mental world, and
Mhm.
keep the physical world, like, just don't die, don't don't collapse.
Just keep breathing.
Yeah, do
Be
enough
able to move
sports to
your
get
arms
into
and legs.
college. Yeah, you know. I played tennis in high school, and expressly joined the tennis team because they didn't make cuts. That was why. So that like, that was the strategy for my family. Is like, well, you'll have this on your college resume because they can't kick you off. It's like, cool.
But
Yeah.
I really say, like, all of that intellectual self-education, you know, mental, spiritual depth that he pursued in his life, the personal growth, all of that is what made him. I mean, look, I know he was talented and physically coordinated and worked his body, and his body was amazing and all that, but it's what gave all of that this extra um energy to it, because there was like this. I mean, it sounds cheesy to say, but it was the full spectrum. It was like mind, body, spirit. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
All like coming together, intersecting in one place. And there is a quality to his energy. Like even when you watch him on screen, you're just like, there's something different about that guy.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that there's a one way to kind of frame it is that it seemed to have a purpose,
Yeah.
and
I love that.
that isn't a given,
Yeah.
and you kind of, it's funny because there's a not, to me at least, maybe other people don't feel this way, but I certainly feel this way. To me, there's a not dissimilar physical resemblance between Bruce Lee and Prince.
Oh, uh-huh.
And there's something about, I've always associated them in my mind. And one of the things that I think is interesting about that is there is, the aspects of like swagger and things like that. Those are easy things to sort of locus on. But there's also the sense of like a depth of exploration
Yeah.
and intent,
Mhm.
and you don't always get that, and so there's like when you watch Bruce Lee on screen, to this day, he doesn't look like anyone else.
Mhm.
And he's making decisions about what he's doing. Very clear decisions that have been, like as an actor, you see right away. Like he's
Mhm.
deciding what story to tell.
Right.
And it's mostly, when I think about him, it is funny to me, but I think I would wager that if most people really thought about it, if someone said, okay, pick out the thing, the image you have in your head, what is the thing that's really doing it for you? It's his face.
Mm.
To me, it's his face.
Mm.
It's everything going on behind his eyes. And you could remove everything else. And that's the thing you need. And as an actor, that's incredibly powerful, right? That's what made him a great actor to me,
Yeah.
Um, and
I
that
like
sort of,
that.
that sort of energy and intention,
Yeah.
it's, it's necessary to do really special work, I think.
Mm. Mhm.
And this is part of the reason why, much to writers and producers' chagrin, like, actors are constantly digging for intention and why am I doing this? And because we want to fuel that. Like, we know what it is to have it and to not have it.
Mhm.
And we know it makes a difference,
Yeah.
And sometimes there's an analogy I like to think about, which is, music recording.
Mhm.
And, you can do everything on your home laptop now. You can make a finished album. You can do it on your phone now, right? If
Mhm.
you're willing to put in the time. But there's something amazing about an incredibly accomplished musician stepping into a great sounding room and
Mhm.
an engineer that knows exactly what they're doing, and they just
Mm.
put the best mics up, and they just pull up the faders and they just capture it. All they're doing
Yeah.
is capturing it. They're not making anything. They're just
Right.
like witnessing it and printing it,
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's a lot of the times, I feel like that's a lot of the times what actors are kind of pursuing, that there's something we can pursue. We're not always going to get it, of course.
Mhm.
But if we can get to the right place, you won't have to do anything to this take. Like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like, it's going to
Yeah.
give you something that it would be almost impossible to put in yourself
Yeah.
in some other part of the process. And I think there's a question as to whether people believe that's true or not, or believe that's valid. And
Mm.
I have seen both sides of that argument, and I think they're both credible. Like, I've seen scenes where I'm like, I know that take was terrible. You did something incredible to it, and I look amazing. And there are other times where you feel like, and particularly on stage, you feel it very directly,
Yeah. Mhm.
where you feel like the entire audience is with you, and
Yeah.
you can have them do almost anything. Like, you feel so locked in with them that
Yeah.
you can bring them anywhere you need to,
Yeah.
and they'll go with you. They've given you that. They've said, we trust you, and I feel like that's still something. That's still a thing,
Yeah.
and that's why it's worth pursuing.
Well, you said something really interesting about intention, which just, as an actor, you're always looking for intention, but I think that intention is such a key element to life, to what you bring to life
Mm-hmm.
and to personal growth and to your approach, right? It's like if you search and discover for the intention within yourself for whatever it is that you're
Mm.
doing, there is like this extra layer of purpose and
Mm.
energy that is brought to the situation where you're not just like, oh, I don't know. you know?
Yeah, and what's so tricky about that though is like there's every single thing has its own particular trap, right?
Yeah.
And I find myself on the other side. Like Jonathan is fond of and rightfully so, accusing me of overthinking things, and I do. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I have found for myself that the process that I trust is to really atomize things, um, and just look at all its constituent parts and just like lay it out on the table, and you know, and I like that. It's fun for me. It's not a chore. So
Mm-hmm.
that's part of the reason why I do it. But I'm quite envious of actors where I feel like they really go with their gut, that they're quite in the moment, that they're like
Yeah.
live wire responsive instruments. Um,
Yeah.
because I don't feel like that's my native home,
Mm-hmm.
um, in terms of the work process. And so I do think there's a trap in sort of intention becoming ossified and stubborn and trying to dominate a landscape of people you need to collaborate with. That's the trap.
Yeah.
Um, and so I think that's something I'm quite aware of as somebody who does want to dig for those things because um, fortunately, with the people that I trust, I do get pushback and it's kind of like maybe you're taking
Yeah.
just it's not that, you know.
Well,
But
whatever you're
on
doing, you're
page
doing a good
72,
job.
there's a word that
Yeah,
and they're
right.
like, no, that's a typo. You're doing too much.
Yeah,
Um,
that's not a thing.
no, that's not a thing.
Um,
But and likewise, the person that I think is sort of intuitive and very free and very responsive, that can dissolve into a lack of preparedness and
Totally.
an inability to stick to a plan, an
Right.
inability to work with other people because you don't understand that they need a little more structure than you do.
Yeah, yeah.
A
Well, as
lack
my
of
dad said, like, here's natural instinct and here's control, and you
mm,
have to combine them in
yes,
harmony, right?
exactly.
Like,
Yeah.
you can't be all one way and you can't be all the other. And I think all of all of human life is in a little, like, just being a human being is a little bit of a trap. It's all a trap, and it's
Yes.
all kind of designed to be that way, so that
Yes.
you're like, oh, wait a minute. Oh, I did that thing again, or I went too far this time, or no, da, 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 or this situation calls for that, instead of this, or whatever. So, it's part of the adventure.
Yeah, it's literally like, we talk about it like a trap and you could think about it like a bear trap or you could think about it like an escape room. Like it's like
Totally.
there's a gamification aspect to the
Yes.
idea that you have to have a certain amount of agility in your life. And that's part of the reason why I think I'm so I do have great affection for anything that allows me what feels like accelerated growth because I
Yeah.
feel like I'm being given access to different tools or different perspectives that will allow me to escape like traps that I might find myself in or
Right.
that allow me to understand how other people are feeling sort of bound up. And then you may have an answer to it. Kieran on our show, I remember being in a scene with him. It made an impression because I didn't know him very well at this time.
Uh-huh.
Um, and I said to him, hey, I kind of want to try this on this line. And he just looked at me and he said, do whatever you want.
Mhm.
And it was like such a great response. I love that response,
Yeah.
and I've kept that with me, and it's like, that's the right attitude to me. Like to me, that's an
Yeah.
actor that's quite confident
Yeah.
and trusts himself to come up
Trust
with something,
himself.
but
Yes.
also doesn't believe it's his place to put a constraint on another actor.
Right.
Right. Um,
Mhm. Mhm.
and I've been tempted to test that, but yeah. Um,
Really, do whatever you want. Really?
really? Okay.
Okay.
I got a lot of ideas. Um, but that feeling, that sort of feeling that, yeah, if I keep assembling sort of a collection of experiences, then I think I can have that sort of effortlessness or freedom with other
Yes.
people, not just myself. Like
Yeah.
I can grant them a certain amount of flexibility if I'm kind of around. And I love that. I remember hearing once about like, fight scenes or very, very difficult scenes. And I can't remember who was being interviewed, but the interviewer was saying something like, do you find it helpful to sort of maintain distance on set or create a sense of animosity because your characters are in conflict.
Mm.
And the person said was like the exact opposite, which I completely agree with. It's like the more love and trust you have, the
Yes.
deeper you can go into
Yes.
the fight, because you know you're safe.
Right.
You know the other person's not there to hurt you, and so you can
Right.
kind of just enjoy it. You can
Yeah.
just kind of like really enjoy it. And
I
so
love that.
I think it's so great, and and that
Yeah.
extends to the physical world too, right? If you have stunt people that you just will trust with your life, like
I think it extends to life too.
yeah,
It's like it
yeah,
can be a metaphor for
absolutely.
life, and
That's what I should have said.
yeah, that's all
That's
right.
right, Shannon. That's what I should have said.
That's why we're a team here. You
Good.
know what I'm
Just edit that
saying?
first part out. It's good.
But it does lead me to my other question that I'm asking everyone during this family cycle,
Mm.
which is, my father had a quote, "Under the sky, under the heavens, we're all one family," right?
Yeah.
There is but one family. And so, the world is a crazy polarized place right now. So not that I'm expecting you to have the keys to the kingdom, or the answer, but what in your perspective do you think our human family needs to be more as one, to come together more? What do you think would be helpful?
I think I keep landing on humility.
Humility.
And I think that people, when they hear humility, they think of a shrinking away.
Right.
And I don't think of it that way. I
Mhm.
think of it as an openness
Yeah.
and a larger perspective of your significance in the world and your significance to other people. And again, not in the sense of emphasizing a diminishment,
Right.
because knowing your place in the world could actually, I think, lead you to places where you go, you know what, I really have to take this more seriously because people depend on me.
Yeah. Hmm.
And so understanding the appropriate sort of perspective on that. But the reason why I say humility versus something like perspective is because humility to me feels like an opening to something active. It feels like it leads to a lot of growth, potential for
Yeah.
growth. And, it's like, if I feel like I've figured it all out, it's a little bit like, what's the point,
Yeah.
But there are a lot of people who um, are looking for someone to tell them how to feel and what to do and how to think,
Hmm.
whether they acknowledge that or not, whether they think they're doing that or not.
Right.
It's somewhat puzzling to me that
Hmm.
sometimes the same voices that say, I'm pro freedom, or I'm pro choice, or I'm pro free speech, whatever.
Hmm.
They sometimes they fall lockstep in line behind a person, or an
Yeah.
identity. Um,
Yeah.
and that goes, that exists everywhere too. It's not
Everywhere.
just like on the right in Trump. It's not just on the
Yeah.
left and other people.
Yeah.
It's a sort of instinct that we have.
Hmm.
Whereas I think that if you are kind of trying to maintain a certain level of openness and a sense of place, which
Hmm.
I define as humility, then you're constantly in this place where you can keep learning and keep growing, and you can kind of keep learning and keep growing from almost anyone. You can pull something from almost anyone. I've learned
Yeah.
incredible amounts from having conversations with people on social media who are very much on the other side of the political spectrum, different
Hmm.
walks of life, different circumstances, particularly different circumstances. And
Yeah.
I think that it's been so helpful to me.
Hmm.
And despite all of the sort of stereotyping of people on the other side of the political spectrum as rabid zealots,
Hmm.
to a person, they've all been incredibly polite, very easy to talk to, very willing to talk,
Hmm.
and we simply disagree on a bunch of things. And I can't say, I haven't even visited half of this country.
Right.
How do I know what life is like there?
Yeah.
It would be
Yeah.
incredibly arrogant for me to assume I do.
Yeah.
And I don't want that to be an impediment to better understanding people or myself or
Hmm.
the world as I go forward. There's nothing wrong with looking stupid, It's like,
Yeah.
who cares?
Yeah. Right.
Ultimately, who cares, Um,
Yeah. Well, and to me, this makes me think of the empty cup.
Yeah.
Like
Hmm.
humility is the empty cup. It's like there has to be enough space in there for something else to come in,
Yeah.
right? Like if
Hmm.
your cup is full, then that's it. But nothing, you can't learn anything else. You can't grow. You can't accept anything else. So,
And one aspect to that, which I think is sometimes we don't talk enough about, is I think philosophically people can sign on to that pretty easily, actually.
mhm,
What's difficult is that we have structures in place which really disincentivize that,
yeah,
really strongly disincentivize that. That's a
yeah,
problem.
hmm,
That if we're starting from, you know, kids having to do applications to get into like a school when they're 3,
yeah,
they're being told you have to be right,
hmm,
right?
hmm, hmm,
And that escalates all the way up, you
yeah.
know, which is why weirdly over the past 4 years I've developed a lot more sympathy towards politicians, strangely. But like there's
Yeah.
just the idea of trying to represent even your district,
Hmm.
the thousands of people in your district, like it's unwinnable,
Yeah.
unwinnable, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So our imposition of metrics upon people who are doing that job is hideously unfair to them, I think,
Hmm.
because there's no way for them to win. It's an impossible game.
Hmm.
Um, and winning isn't a goal, right? It
Yeah.
shouldn't be a goal. Being
Right.
right shouldn't be a goal
Right.
in so many circumstances, but all of our structures conspire to make those the metrics that we understand, you know?
Well, we've based a lot of our society on competition,
Hmm.
right? And my father even would say like competition is not a good structure for growth because you are pitting yourself against someone else rather than like really going inside and looking at yourself and developing yourself. You're just
Hmm.
trying to beat this other thing and be the winner,
Yeah.
you know.
Hmm.
So it's just not and that's a lot of what, oh, I'm winning, oh, I'm right. Like all of that is a competition model.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Yeah.
the way that it can manifest even in, it's funny because like when I see a fight on screen, I'm completely disengaged if there's no danger. So like one of my favorite action people is Harrison Ford because he's constantly getting his ass kicked and he's like
Yeah.
constantly on the verge of like losing it.
Yeah.
Um, and that's what's great about it is that it reminds you why you're watching it to begin with, you
Yeah.
know. And there's something very similar to me about like for all of the sort of uh, dominance that is displayed by like by Bruce Lee in his movies,
Mhm.
there's real jeopardy.
Mhm.
And the thing that feels different to me is when he's established at a certain level of expertise and a certain level of accomplishment and capability. So to put that guy in jeopardy requires
Right.
something quite extreme, right?
Right.
And so it
Mhm.
becomes this thing of you can kind of have your cake and eat it too. The
Mhm.
danger would be if he was just indestructible and invulnerable, right?
Yeah.
It's just not interesting. It's not dramatic for one thing, and I think he was too
Yeah.
fine an actor to realize like he realized that that was not going to work. But like you need to see the jeopardy there to care,
Yeah.
and that's also this sort of implicit message is like, does this opponent know something I don't know? You
Right.
know,
Yeah.
um, and I find like you can decode action sequences and you can kind of reverse engineer the mentalities of the people behind them a lot of the time, right?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
start to understand sort of what they think they're building, and if there's a deeper story there, you can often sense it, um, or at least I feel like you can after having some experience with it. And speaking with Brett, our amazing stunt coordinator, and his team, Johnny, and all those guys, they do think that at that level, they're really trying to invest in the underpinnings of what the story is in the fight, and that's incredibly rewarding. And then
Yeah.
and then they asked me to do it. And I'm like, I can't do that.
Yeah, right.
This
And I
will really
want you to
help the story.
invest emotionally by putting your leg up here, and
Yeah,
it's
it's
like,
like, can
mm.
is there a fight where Chow sits and has cookies? Is that part of? Can that be part of a fight? I could do that. I could be really good at that. Um, yeah.
Well, let me ask you the last question I like to ask everyone and sort of close out our conversation with, which is there some piece of wisdom or some lesson that you've learned that you would just like to share and pass on to someone else?
Oh gosh. Mm. I don't know if this is wisdom or what have you. I've
Yeah.
said this before on other things, but it's something I hold very close to my heart, which is um, I think that the arts are just incredibly important.
Mhm.
They're so much of the foundation of who we are, how we choose to communicate with each other, and the very expression of the best and the worst that we are. Like it's our ongoing living record of our humanity
Mhm.
is captured in the arts. And there's so many things out there that will diminish that role and make you feel foolish for pursuing or for thinking that it's worth pursuing. And I would just encourage anyone who is considering exploring the arts, professional or non,
Mhm.
young or old, do it.
Yeah.
Absolutely 100% do it. And we need you to do it.
Mhm.
It's not extra.
Right.
It's the core.
Mhm.
A lot of other stuff is extra to me.
Yeah.
That's the core, you know.
Yeah.
And whether that expression comes out through martial arts, like with your father, through song and dance, through writing, through theater, anything, um, we need it. We need
Mhm.
it. I partially think we're suffering in certain ways now because we ignore it. Um,
Yeah. No, I think that's beautiful, and I also really believe that anything that gives someone the direct experience of creativity,
mm,
um, is also giving you the ability to take that creativity and understand how to be creative just
mm-hmm,
in creating your life. It doesn't have to look like
mm-hmm,
painting or music or any of
exactly.
that kind of stuff, right? Like it's just taking what that means, what that process is, and being able to implement it in, just how you go through your day or what you choose to do in every moment.
Yeah. Yeah. I couldn't agree more. I think it's,
Yeah.
you think about, I was just reading as part of warrior research, but it's just sort of like the establishment of like the gold standard.
Mm,
On some levels, it's completely arbitrary,
totally.
right? I mean, there were definite designs why it happened, but
Hmm.
that's that's something we just decided to do, and people have built their entire lives and empires around it,
Hmm.
But you don't have to. Every single child that's born, like, is a creative being. Like, that's
Yeah.
just there. You don't look very. You don't have to look very far for it. And so it's like, what's more real? What's
Right.
actually more real, right? That's why I don't think that um, people give it enough credit. They don't give their own impulses to do it enough credit, and they don't give it enough oxygen.
Yeah.
Um, and I think they should. I think people really should. I think everyone can sing, for example. People are like, oh, I hear this all the time. I can't sing. I can't sing. It's like, you absolutely can sing,
Yeah.
and you should sing. That's the most
Yeah.
important thing. It's like, you should sing. And if
Yeah.
someone thinks it's great and someone thinks it's not, so what?
Right.
So what? You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
would you
Yeah.
listen if someone said you shouldn't walk?
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
you shouldn't walk. You got cars. Why walk? It's like,
Right.
walk. You should walk. You got a body. You should walk. You should do the thing your body can do.
Yeah.
Whatever that thing is.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Anyway.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so
Oh my
much
God.
for
Thanks for
this
having me.
beautiful, insightful, intelligent, amazing conversation
Oh
that I
man.
know people are going to love. I have to say, I really think you are an incredible actor.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
um, I just want to see you doing more and more and more. I'm super excited to have your creative voice in the writer's room.
Thank
And
you.
it's going
Thank
to
you.
be I can't wait to get back to South Africa. So
Oh
keep
my
that
gosh.
going.
And thank you for, I mean, I know the rest of the cast feels the same way, but like the project really comes from you and from your efforts, et cetera. And just to, I think you've given us a home, which is
Oh,
quite a thing. And
oh.
so thank you
Well,
for that.
I will say you're welcome because I don't wanna reject your compliment.
We're being taped.
And yes, we are being taped. I am literally just like the smallest little piece of this puzzle in so many ways, but I'm just so thrilled that 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 this was made and that
Yeah.
we're all doing this together and
Yeah.
all of the voices and all of the people and the talent that bring their energy to this is just so special to
Yeah.
me. So
I agree.
yeah. So well, thank you so much.
Thank
Such a
you.
pleasure to speak to you. And I can't wait to share this episode with everyone and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you, Shannon. You too.
All right. Bye.